Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. The Lakers won their 7th straight game and 10th game in the past 11 to improve to 44-25 on the season, beating the Houston Rockets 124-116 tonight, sweeping the start of the road trip and the baseball style series in Houston. What a win for the Lakers, a clutch masterclass by Luka Doncic. Just walked Houston down the stretch there with a series of step back threes and a fadeaway in the post, all while being defended by Amen Thompson, one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. But a couple of nice reads along the baseline for lobs to Rui and LeBron. Big block from Rui on Jabari Smith. Just a big series of plays by the Lakers down the stretch, but Luka led the way with 49 and 10, nearly had a triple-double, another triple-double. He's been on a tear lately. It's just incredible. It's ridiculous and insane what he is doing, and we have to acknowledge this is not normal. This is not normal what we're seeing. So just an incredible performance from Luka, an incredible performance from the Lakers. They have a great first half. Then things go off the rails in the third quarter. They're turning the ball over left and right after taking care of it. They had 3 turnovers in the first half, 6 turnovers in the third quarter, and then finished with 14 overall. So that they had 5 in the fourth. So they doubled their turnover output in the third quarter alone, but also struggled with it a bit in the fourth. The offense was stagnant. Just the ball movement wasn't the same that it was in the first half. They were giving up buckets in transition, offensive rebounds, cuts. Alperen Şengün made a real difference in this game versus his absence in the first game, but none of it mattered. The Lakers go on a big run to open the fourth quarter, led by LeBron James and Austin Reeves. Then start trading baskets. Game is pretty close. Rockets respond with their own little run. Looks like the game's hanging in the balance there, but then Luka takes over and LA just rips the heart out of the Rockets and now has won the season series against Houston, Minnesota, and Denver, which means they effectively have a 3-game lead in the loss column over all 3 of those teams. If you look at the standings right now, the Lakers are 44-25. That puts them at 3rd in the West. Minnesota is technically only a game and a half back at 43-27, but with the tiebreaker, that's not factoring in the tiebreaker. With the tiebreaker, that's actually 2.5 games. But when you look at the loss column, there are a couple losses back, which means they can't have the same record as the Lakers. Otherwise, the Lakers win get the higher seed. So that's basically 3 games back in the loss column. Houston now 41-27. They're 3 games back in the loss column. And then Denver on the second night of a back-to-back lost to Memphis today. So they are actually 42-28. They're the 6th seed right now. Lakers would be matched up with them. That'd be a fun first round series. But they're 4 games back basically from the Lakers. So Denver, best case scenario for Denver right now is probably the 4 seed, and they might be looking at 5 or 6. So they could be on a collision course with OKC if they end up in that 4-5. But just a lot to be encouraged by. Like the Lakers just keep finding ways to win these games. And that was something I talked about after the last Houston game was like the New York game had its own identity in terms of LA leading wire to wire. The Minnesota game was like a rough first half, a slow start, and then they break through finally in the third, turn it into a rout. You had the Denver game where LA was in control, then Denver was in control for a portion of that game, and then LA out executed one of the best clutch teams of the last few years. Denver has been always in the top 10 or top 5 in clutch wins and clutch net rating, and the Lakers out executed them. Then they play Houston in a rock fight, a slower game that should favor the bigger, stronger, more athletic Houston Rockets, and LA ends up beating them at their own game down the stretch last game. And then tonight, I think, is more how I would envision this series going, where like Houston's offense would look better. They're not going to be scoring 92 points every time they play the Lakers, but the Lakers are just going to score at a insane level. Like tonight, the Lakers had a 130 offensive rating against the Rockets and outscored them 35-24 in the fourth. But shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you all. Shout out to the mods. It's been a second since I shouted out the mods. You guys do. You guys hold it down in the chat, so I appreciate you all. But let's get into it. So Buha's big picture is Houston, you have a problem. And so this was the second straight game that the Lakers dominated the Rockets in the clutch. And extrapolating this out into a potential playoff series here, the Lakers are 19-6 in the clutch. They have been the best team in the clutch all season. They are first in offense in the clutch. They are sixth in defense in the clutch, which I find very notable, and first in net rating. Houston, meanwhile, 18-19 in the clutch. And I believe these numbers are updated off of tonight's game. But 22nd in offense, 24th in defense, and 24th in net rating. So you see that gap there of the Lakers have just been much better than the Rockets on both sides of the ball. I think we saw that in both of these matchups. And to be quite frank, I think this is how a potential Lakers-Rockets playoff series would go. I think if these two teams were matched up and you told me game one's tomorrow, I'm probably picking the Lakers in 5. Lakers would have home court, but I think Lakers in 5 would be my prediction. There would probably be one game that maybe resembles the Christmas game or resembles that third quarter where Houston's able to turn them over a bunch. The Lakers just don't shoot the ball well. They have a bunch of self-inflicted wounds like they had in that second half, missing free throws. But I think that would be like one game. And if the games are relatively close, I trust the side that has Luka Doncic, LeBron James, and Austin Reeves to out-execute the Rockets' crunch time offense. And frankly, at times, the non-crunch time offense and just like tonight, Lakers threw a bunch of same looks in terms of doubling KD, and Houston eventually countered, but it took them it took them almost until halftime to start really countering some of those things. And they did a nice job in the third quarter. They were having Jabari Smith bring the ball up, initiate the offense. They're playing through Alperen Şengün in the middle of the floor. And like I said a bit earlier, he made a real impact. I mean, he was the best Rocket tonight, 27 points and 10 assists. He did a great job just either attacking mismatches in the middle of the floor. If the Lakers, maybe the Rockets ran a horns action or some sort of pick and roll to get a switch. If it was Austin or Luke, then Şengün would just bulldoze them. But if it was big and the Lakers started digging in, then Şengün was finding cutters and shooters, and he made a real impact. And the Lakers exploited him defensively and were able to attack, and DA had a much bigger night and better performance because Şengün was matched up against him instead of Clint Capella. So that was like when we talked about it last game about adding Alperen Şengün into this matchup, I thought offensively he just takes Houston to a different level. He's not the scorer that KD is, but he does add a different wrinkle with the post game, with the passing, and just with the way that he sort of warps the geometry for them. But then defensively, he's someone that you could target in the pick and roll. And we saw a lot more with Şengün out. The Rockets ended up just going a lot smaller and were switching 1 through 5 and trying to keep Luka in front of them that way. But tonight we saw a lot more blitzing and hedging and putting 2 on the ball. And then that allowed LA to get into their 4-on-3, 3-on-2 opportunities. And they killed those. And so I mentioned Lakers had a 130 offensive rating. They shot 61% for the game, which is an incredible mark. And if not for the 14 turnovers that they had, they could have easily dropped 130 plus in regulation against this team, which Houston is one of the best defenses in the NBA, and on paper has the personnel to really bother the Lakers. Again, we saw that on Christmas. We saw that in stretches of the last game. We saw that in stretches of this game. They've dropped to 8th in defense, and I assume tonight's performance did not help their standing there. But just I say all this to say, I think the Lakers would beat the Rockets in 5, and I think the Lakers can beat any of their potential first-round opponents, but I have maintained, going back to the Denver game that my order of preference would be Houston 1, Minnesota 2, Denver 3. I think the Denver matchup, I just think Denver is the best of those three. I think they have the highest ceiling of those three. They have a championship pedigree. That core has been together for multiple years. And we've seen a couple of crunch times between the Lakers and Nuggets. One went the Nuggets way, one went the Lakers way. With Minnesota, Lakers have dominated them all season, but there's still the caveat of they beat the Lakers in 5 last year. And I don't think it would go that way, but I think it would be much more competitive than the regular season series. And then Houston, to me, is just a team that they've been treading in the wrong direction for a while. I don't like the offense. I don't like the collective decision-making and processing and basketball IQ with this group. I think they make a lot of bad reads, just a lot of impulsive decisions, and especially not having Fred VanVleet and Steven Adams. If they had those two guys, it's a different story. Maybe I'd prefer to play Minnesota if I'm the Lakers. But the Lakers they can't control who they play because they don't play these teams the rest of the way, right? So it's just going to come down to how these teams fare and who ends up being 4, 5, and 6, and assuming the Lakers can hold on to 3. But I'm just stating that if I had my pick, I would easily pick Houston. And I think these last couple of games expose that there's a lot the Lakers can fine tune and clean up. And I think they could be much sharper than what we saw at times over these last couple of games, and some of the turnovers and some of we saw better shooting tonight, but after a hot start, they hit 7 threes in the first quarter, hit 15, which is solid, but definitely cooled off from deep the rest of the way. But I think if not for that disastrous third quarter, this ends up being another Lakers win by double figures, and a pretty easy one for them, I think, in the fourth quarter, had they just not collapsed the way that they did. So certainly, I want to be clear, I don't think any of these three teams are bad. I don't think any of these three teams would be an easy matchup for the Lakers. And I think Minnesota and Denver would those would both, to me, be 6 or 7 game series in either direction, regardless of who wins that said series. Houston's the one where I think the Lakers are just the better team. There's a gap offensively between the two teams. Even defensively, I think Houston's the better defense, but LA's recent defense and defense in this matchup the last couple of games, with the ability to trap and rotate and cause Houston to just make rushed decisions, throwing the ball left or right out of bounds. Freudian slip there. I really like this matchup for the Lakers. So that's my big takeaway from all this is Houston has a Lakers problem. I don't think Houston has a chance in this series, and I think the Lakers would convincingly win a 7-game series against the Houston Rockets if they end up matching up in mid-April. In terms of notable performers, we touched on Luka, but let's touch on it again. 40 points, 9 rebounds, 10 assists, 1 rebound away from another triple-double. 1 steal. Did have 5 turnovers and had several turnovers in that third quarter, but he more than made up for it with the way that he closed this game. 12 for 25 shooting, 7 for 17 on threes. The 3-point shot is been a real weapon for him, and it's just one of those things that it feels like Luka always has this great sense of the moment, and when games are teetering, it just feels like he's going to find a way to make a step back or draw a foul or get into the post, get into his little fadeaway in the middle of the floor. And his just knack for giving the Lakers, snatching the momentum from the opponent and generating it for the Lakers. We've seen that time and time again during this stretch. 9 for 14 at the free throw line, got fouled early on a 3, missed all 3 free throws. But again, I know people were on him with the free throws and the turnovers in the third quarter as Houston made that run, but he walked the Rockets down. It was a clutch masterclass by Luka. And I took some notes on some plays that really stood out. So he had a night, I believe it was a double contest from Amen Thompson and Jabari Smith, where fade away around the right elbow, cashes that. He has splits the double team with just an amazing behind the back move, and it just shows you that like Kevin Durant is retreating against these double teams and coughing the ball up. Luka is inviting the double team, splitting the double team, and then throwing lob passes out of it. So, I mean, he had a couple lobs to DA just throughout the course of the game, but down the stretch of the game, the driving kick to Rui for the three, but also then splitting, finding Rui with the baseline cut for the lob. Rui had a big block on Şengün. Rockets ended up getting the offensive rebound and scoring on it, but it was a nice defensive play from Rui, who I thought had like a quiet game, but came to life there down the stretch and made some really big plays for the Lakers. Luka also attacked a double team, got downhill, same sequence with LeBron, finds LeBron for a dunk, and then he hits the dagger. That shot is just unguardable, right? Like Luka's step back three, particularly from the left wing, that's where that's his bread and butter. How many times have we seen him hit ridiculous shots from that left wing? Cashes it, and that was it. He iced the game with that. So by my count, 8 points and 3 assists there in the last few minutes. Scored 10 points overall in the fourth quarter, but just an incredible display of mastery in terms of shot pass decision making. I thought made all the right plays down the stretch, and his control and calm under pressure in comparison with the Rockets' general disposition and inability to score and run an effective crunch time offense, to me, is the biggest difference in this potential series. Like, Luka's getting defended by Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, two of the better perimeter defenders in the league. And if he somehow draws a switch, it's like Kevin Durant or Jabari Smith, two 6'10", 6'11" guys who can at least dance with him on the perimeter, keep their arms up, and make it difficult. But it doesn't matter. He cooked the Rockets in back-to-back games, and it's just he's making, I think, a real push here for the MVP. And I know people still want to put him in that next tier. I completely disagree. I just did Spectrum last night, and they asked if we agreed with Luka being fourth in MVP, and I said I vehemently disagree with that. I think that is far too low. So Luka's making a real push here to be much higher in the MVP conversation than LeBron James. I want to save LeBron for one of my takeaways, but I will touch on him, just the overall stat line tonight. 30 points, 13 of 14 shooting. JJ was joking after the game that the one shot he missed was him trying to foul bait, but in reality, I think LeBron got fouled on that shot. 2 for 2 on threes, which were actually his first 2 shots of the game. For 2 of 3, hit a couple of threes early. 2 for 3 at the free throw line, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. I thought LeBron was awesome tonight. Him injuring the elbow again, similar to the game in Denver, sort of like impacted just his role down the stretch. He ended up getting subbed out and was out for a few minutes, and the Lakers put him back with a couple of minutes left. But I thought he was incredible tonight. This was, to me, certainly from an efficiency standpoint, 13 of 14, it really does not get much better than that. I don't think you can expect anybody to go 14 of 14, but the 30 points is LeBron's highest output since I'm scrolling far back. It is since January 13th against Atlanta. Remember that game? LA dropped 141 in a blowout over Atlanta. That was the last time LeBron James scored 30 points in a game. His previous high in between that stretch was 28 against Dallas right before the All-Star break. So we're talking about LeBron had not scored 30 points in a game in over 2 months. So this was certainly his best and most efficient offensive performance. I think there are takeaways from this that I want to touch on during the takeaway section, but a brilliant performance from LeBron tonight. And I guess to kind of tease it, a sign that he does not always have to be the number 3. And I don't think the best strategy is always for him to be the number 3. I think there are situations in some big some big matchups potentially for the Lakers in the playoffs where LeBron, I think, makes more sense as the number 2, Austin taking a step back as the number 3. But again, I will touch on that in one of my takeaways. Then we'll actually pivot to DeAndre Ayton. I want to give DeAndre Ayton some love here. 16 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 blocks, a turnover, 8 for 10 shooting. So just, really no notes on DA. Like, I thought he came out with the requisite energy and effort, and he was being aggressive and catching and finishing. And I thought his timing and his reads in the pick and roll. I mean, first bucket of the game is Ayton out of the short roll, hitting LeBron in the left corner for a 3. So that was one of his 2 assists. But defensively, blocking shots, even his fouls, I felt were more aggressive fouls with him trying to block shots, trying to be more of an intimidating presence around the basket. And I'm always for aggressive fouls. I would rather you commit aggressive fouls than passive fouls. So I enjoyed, most of his fouls. But I mean, he just had an awesome game. And I think sometimes with him, people can focus too much on the numbers in terms of like whether he's impacting the game just strictly by like points and rebounds. For me, it's never that. It's more of how quickly is he getting back in transition and getting out in transition. Like how hard is he running the floor? Is he boxing out? Is he screening well? Is he rotating defensively? Is he calling out coverages defensively? I think there's a lot more things for me with DA that determine whether he's doing a good job rather than the overall stat line, because his role and usage will fluctuate game to game. So if he's getting 3 shots in a game, I'm not expecting him to drop 18 points. That's not realistic. But if he's getting 8, 9, 10 shots with his typical efficiency, I do expect like a baseline level of production. But for me, it's more so, is he doing all the little things? And tonight I thought he did. I mean, only had 4 rebounds, but I thought like I didn't really have an issue with the rebounding tonight. So like that, looking at the Lakers rebounds overall, Luka had 9. No one else had more than 5. LeBron had 5. So just kind of one of those low rebounding nights for the Lakers. They need to be better than that. That's been an area where they've slipped recently. They've slipped post All-Star break and have been giving up a lot more offensive rebounds, a lot more second chance points. But I don't put that entirely on DA tonight. And I thought he just was really solid. And it was nice to see that coming off of, I'm going to touch on him a little bit more with one of my takeaways, but I just wanted to give him a much deserved shout out. Then Austin Reeves, 14 points, 3 rebounds, 8 assists, 1 block, 1 turnover, 4 for 9 shooting, 1 for 3 on threes, 5 for 6 at the free throw line. I'm going to touch on him with one of the takeaways, same one with LeBron, where I want to talk more about their roles in specific matchups. But I thought Austin was better in some ways tonight. Like from an offensive perspective, I thought like definitely passed the ball better, had 5 assists last game against the Rockets to go along with just 1 turnover tonight, 8 assists to 1 turnover, but still not the same Austin we had just seen the last 4 games from New York through Denver. 25 plus in those 4 straight games, 50+% shooting in those 4 straight games, multiple threes in those 4 games. These past couple games, 1 for 11 on threes and shot under 45% in both games. So I think this is a tough matchup for Austin. I mean, he is the way the Rockets are deploying their defenders. Austin's actually being defended by Amen Thompson, which is one of the tough. I mean, he's one of the best perimeter defenders, and I think one of the toughest matchups for Austin. Just from Amen is a 0.1% athlete in the NBA, which is saying something. And then they prefer to go to Tari Eason and even some Jabari on Luka, and then they'll switch Amen Thompson or situationally use him on Luka, like they used him on Luka down the stretch. But I liked some of what we saw from Austin in terms of like he leveraged some getting downhill, getting to the free throw line, some of the passing, but I don't think he was quite as impactful defensively tonight, where as like last game, I thought he made up for some of the offensive struggles with the defensive end, with the 4 stocks and the charge drawn, which really swung the momentum in the Lakers' favor. Tonight was not the same output on that side of the ball, but I also think like took a step back offensively, and after going 5 for 18 last game, was like, I'm going to be the number, like he was the number 4 tonight. Luka had his 25 shots. LeBron had his 14. DA had his 10. Austin only took 9 shots. So I guess technically with the free throws, you would put his usage ahead of Ayton's. But I thought he also kind of recognized the moment and was looking to more so feed Luka and LeBron, get those guys going or get DA going. And took a little bit of a step back offensively, but I will touch on that more with one of my takeaways. Marcus Smart, 5 points, 4 assists, 2 steals. Didn't struggled offensively, 2 for 7, 1 for 5 on threes. Had some good looks, and I think tonight is one of those nights where the way that the ball will find Marcus sometimes, and the way that teams will shift their defense to giving up open threes or semi-open threes to Marcus can backfire and hurt the Lakers offense. But I thought defensively, still this dude, plus minus could have a lot of noise with it, but he still finds a way to be second on the team in plus minus, first among the starters. It's just the Lakers consistently, it's enough of a trend where the Lakers consistently win the minutes with Marcus Smart on the floor. He has led the group in plus minus in net rating all season. Just good things happen when Marcus is out there. And I thought defensively, he did a great job locking into KD off the ball. His defense against KD kind of reminds me of when Ron Artest would defend KD in the early 2010s. And it was just about being physical with him. And we saw some of that with Tony Allen as well against KD. But KD just always struggled with more, actually, the players with the lower center of gravity, and the strong bases and the handsy guys. That's exactly Marcus Smart. So that's another wrinkle within all this. KD had 18 points, 7 for 11 shooting, was efficient from that perspective, but 4 assists to 4 turnovers, continues to struggle with the Lakers' coverages. And I thought Marcus, as the primary guy who would funnel him into certain traps, or sometimes if he got switched off of him, then playing the passing lanes and just making it tough on KD, I thought he was really good in that aspect tonight. Then Rui, I mentioned it, some big plays down the stretch, hit a huge 3 in the left corner, had a nice cut for the baseline lob dunk from Luka, had a block on Şengün inside. And so I thought he had been relatively quiet and underwhelming up to that point, but he came up big in the clutch, and Lakers went with Rui for a bit with LeBron out, and then brought LeBron back in, took Rui out, but he helped them win those minutes. And he was the one who led the team in plus minus tonight. So a much deserved shout out for Rui, especially down the stretch of the game. Jake LaRavia came in, 5 points, 3 rebounds, had an offensive rebound, had a steal, had a block, was making some plays defensively. I thought that the huge play that I kind of felt flew under the radar a little bit was that steal he had against Şengün for the dunk in transition in the beginning of the fourth, because Lakers are down 92-89 entering the fourth. LeBron driving kick, I believe it was a driving kick, maybe it was out of a post up, but I think it was a driving kick to Austin in the left corner. Austin hits the 3, and then very next possession, they're trying to get Şengün the ball at the top of the arc, and he's battling with Jake, and Jake just comes from behind, swipes it, pokes it loose, gets out in transition, gets a dunk. And that was a huge play that in a matter of, it was less than 45 seconds, the Lakers went from down 3 to up 2. And that just propelled them into gave them some momentum, some much needed momentum. I think Jake, especially in some of these fourth quarters, but he's had these spurts where he will be part of a run that I think have been important. But also hit a 3, as the broadcast pointed out, had not made a 3 in the past 7 games. So it was nice to see a 3 fall for him. Jackson, just not a good matchup for Jackson. I think we have enough, or not enough of a sample size, but we have a couple games here where Jackson has just not played well against Houston. I think they're switching, and when if he's matched up with either Capella, who didn't really play much tonight, but can out physical him, or if he's matched up in a switching scheme, or Şengün, it's just, there's not really a great matchup for Jackson out there. Only went 1 for 4 at the free throw line, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 block. I liked his defense. I thought he was playing up to touch, and he was out there a lot when Reed Shepherd was out there, and I thought he did a nice job of cutting. Like when Ayton had been out there, Reed had walked into, there was one play where he walked into a wide open pull-up three, and I think in general between the two, Jackson's done a better job of playing up to touch and pressuring the ball, and I thought Jackson did that well tonight. So I liked his, like he switched on to KD a little bit. I liked his perimeter defense tonight, but outside of that, it was a relatively quiet game. And then Luke Kennard, 5 points, hit a three, and we talked about it. Rui, Luke, and Austin went 0 for 12 last game on threes. Tonight, they went 4 for 7, so over 50%. You will take that. You'd like to see the volume be higher than just 7, but from 0 for 12 to 4 for 7, you take that. Luke, one thing I really like about Luke in some of these matchups is, although he will get overpowered, and there were several times where your Şengün got him a couple times, or Amen Thompson, or whoever, he's just like, he's going to fight, he's going to scrap, and his off-ball physicality, offensively and defensively, I think like his stature belies his physicality and his ability to actually like set screens or sort of dislodge guys. Like he's in there scrapping, and I want to like give him his credit there, but just has now had this stretch of a few games where he has not been as impactful as he was beforehand. Was more efficient tonight from a shooting and scoring perspective, but did have 3 turnovers to just 1 assist. So he was second on the team in turnovers, only played 18 minutes. He's kind of come back down to earth after being this super high impact offensive bench role player. I think he will bounce back and steady out somewhere in between this version of him and the previous version of him. I still think he'll be more on the side of the previous version of him, but I think he was playing a little bit over maybe his normal level. But I'm not too worried about Luke yet. In terms of stat of the night, I mean, it was almost going to be the free throws, because the Lakers just sometimes go through these stretches where they cannot cannot make any free throws. But I will go with I will admit I actually did not pick a stat of the night till right now, but let's go with Luka's 8 points and 3 assists down the stretch of this game, because that to me was the story of the game. Luka distancing the Lakers and just almost single-handedly out executing Houston and whatever they threw at him, whether it was switching or hedging, doubling. So that'll be my stat of the night. Or you know what? Let's just say, how about this? I'll pivot. 7 will be the stat of the night, because the Lakers have tied their season high in terms of a win streak. They had that 7-game win streak earlier in the season from mid-November through late November. But I think this one's definitely more impressive than that one. Certainly, I think applies more toward the playoffs and what we could project out with this team. So there, I gave you a couple of stats of the night. And then takeaway number 1 is going to be when 3 becomes 2. And what I mean by that, this is talking about LeBron and Austin. So there's been a lot of chatter, a lot of discourse around who's the number 2, who's the number 3, who should be the number 2, who should be the number 3. JJ came out and stated his viewpoint going into the Houston game, which was that LeBron should be the number 3 moving forward, and that the best version of the Lakers is, he didn't explicitly state the hierarchy, but we know Luka's number 1. So by process of elimination, that means Austin is number 2, LeBron number 3. And since returning from injury, like Austin found his groove during that stretch when LeBron was out for a couple games. LeBron comes back. He has embraced being the number 3. Up until tonight, there had been at least a 5 field goal attempt difference between LeBron and Austin in the previous few games that, since LeBron returned. But tonight, for me, was a perfect example of something I've talked about over the last few days while we've discussed this, that I think sometimes we get a little bit too concerned with labels and who's 2, who's 3, or is it a 2A, 2B, whatever. And there are shades of gray within all of this. And tonight, to me, is a perfect example, because tonight was a night where LeBron had it going. He went 8 for 8 in the first half. He had 18 points in the first half. If anything, I think the Lakers went far too away from LeBron in that third quarter. He was rolling and they kind of stopped going to him. And I think that's where, like, if anything, like the trying to establish a certain pecking order can be detrimental to you, because then sometimes it makes you a little bit more rigid to what's actually happening on the court and what the matchups dictate. So I thought tonight, like the 14 field goal attempts for LeBron, honestly, with how he was playing and how efficient he was tonight, that should have probably been 17, 18, 19 field goal attempts for LeBron. I think it was too low. But my point with this is that looking ahead, and the Lakers will play one of these teams down the stretch here in OKC, but I think there are 3 matchups where I look at it as more of a LeBron matchup than an Austin matchup. OKC, San Antonio, and Houston. And that very well, if the Lakers make it to the conference finals or finals, that could be their path. They could face Houston in round 1, San Antonio in round 2, and OKC in round 3. And that would be then, I think, more of LeBron's series than Austin's series. But one thing within those, and as we've discussed sometimes with Austin and his struggles in some of these matchups, I think the reason why they're more LeBron matchups than Austin matchups is all 3 of those teams are elite defenses with great ball pressure and disruption and elite backcourt athleticism. So you think about an Ahmed Thompson on Austin, or a Stephon Castle on Austin, or an Alex Caruso, a Kason Wallace. Like, those are some of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, period. And part of it's their IQ and their instincts and their tenacity and their physicality. But a big part of it's also just their foot speed, their pure athleticism, and their abilities to make plays against lesser athletes. So we saw the first OKC matchup in that second half where Austin struggled. Haven't really seen him in a big sample size against San Antonio, but there was that second game that he played in early December where the Lakers had the big 3. They got ran off the court. And then Houston, I thought he was okay in the Christmas matchup before he got injured and exited early. But certainly not up to par these last couple of games. So with, I think, Austin not being able to quite be himself against likely those 3 teams, and him potentially having a smaller offensive role and being more of a number 3, there naturally needs to be a shifting within the usage within the hierarchy. And that's where, to me, LeBron steps in. And LeBron, with his athleticism and physicality and power and force, you saw it tonight with several monster dunks. You saw it last game. I've said this before, that after every show, there's always like 2 or 3 things I immediately think about that I regret not bringing up in the moment. The first thing I thought of after last show was LeBron dunking on Jabari Smith. That was just an insane play from LeBron. And I mentioned his finishing, but I did not mention that play in particular. And I wanted to acknowledge that play. But tonight, several dunks in transition. He had that beautiful back cut for the lob dunk, but also had that one in the fourth quarter as well. So several, part of the reason why he went 13 for 14 is because a lot of his shots were in the paint at the rim, but that is by design, and that is what he can do, and that's when he's at his best. So I just think looking at those 3 matchups and projecting out ahead into the postseason, I also like that those teams don't really have great matchups for LeBron in particular. So if you think about Houston, KD, they're going to want to conserve a little bit because he's going to have such a heavy offensive load. But Jabari Smith, maybe he's their best matchup, but he's a little too light. Tari Eason, you probably have to put him on Austin or Luka. If you shift him off of maybe you shift him off of Austin onto LeBron, but I think that's like, then that changes how you attack with Austin. Like Şengün is too slow to guard LeBron, and then DFS, I it just has not been the same player this season. I don't think he quite has the physicality and strength to do it. Josh Okogie, I think, is too small. Reed Shepherd, obviously, too small. So you just look at this matchup, and I think this is a great matchup for LeBron, whether it's in transition, whether it's off of slot cuts, whether it's in the post, whether it's spamming pick and roll, inverted pick and roll, whatever, horns actions. Like there's just different ways to attack and get a slew of mismatches in this particular matchup. But I think that also applies to San Antonio and OKC. Now, San Antonio, the challenge there is you have this 7'7" player in the paint or around the paint that warps the geometry defensively. So that's a part you have to figure out. But like, if you just think about putting Champagny or Barnes or Keldon Johnson on LeBron, those guys are just all too small to guard LeBron and match up with him from a physicality perspective. And then even OKC, I mean, you're putting Chet on LeBron. I guess J-Dub is the one guy who gets closest, but I still think, LeBron's a couple inches taller than him and has got, 20, 30 pounds on him. So I look at those three matchups as, to me, matchups where I would shift the game plan to let's leverage LeBron's athleticism and power and force and his physical gifts and physical advantages in this particular matchup. And let's shift Austin more to the number 3 and more of a facilitator, shooter, off-ball player rather than him as the number 2. Now, against Minnesota, we've seen Austin has cooked Minnesota all 3 games this season, which is a departure from last postseason. And against Denver, Austin has played well against Denver. So I think those matchups, they don't have the athleticism and foot speed to stymie Austin, and he could win because McDaniels is going to be on Luka, and Ant has not been the same caliber of defender this year. If you look at some of their defensive on-off numbers, and Chris Finch just kind of called him out recently about his defense and that it's been very up and down. So I like Austin more in those 2 matchups. If LA ends up matching up with Minnesota and Denver, and like those teams, I think have a little, like, now you have Julius Randle going up against LeBron, who we saw that. That was like an unstoppable force meets an immovable object during last postseason. And then on the Denver side, you have Aaron Gordon. So that's where it's a little bit different, why I think you lean more into Austin versus LeBron. But this is why, to me, like we could talk, like JJ can say LeBron's number 3, and it's obviously played out with the numbers and with the usage recently. But I think it needs to be more situational, more circumstantial. And in a few of these potential playoff matchups, I would actually lean more into LeBron than Austin. Takeaway number 2 is, I touched on this at the top, but the Lakers are in pole position now to be the number 3 seed and repeat being the number 3 seed. I think if you look at the schedule, they're probably going to win 52 or 53 games. And that might be conservative with the way that they're playing. They could win 54, they could win 55, but they got 13 games here down the stretch, and they have. So I mean, at Miami tomorrow is going to be a tough one. Miami's rolling, and that's just a tough back-to-back, flying from Houston to Miami. And I think Lakers should be favored and should win the game, assuming everybody's available and physically right. I think there's been a bit of a war of attrition here recently, but then you got at Orlando. Orlando just beat the Lakers not too long ago. They've been playing some great basketball. Then you got at Detroit. So like these next 3 games are going to be tough. I think the Lakers probably go 2-1, dropping 1 game of those 3. Then later in the season, they got Cleveland, OKC twice. We'll see if OKC is still jockeying for positioning with San Antonio, if they're playing for anything. I assume they'll take at least one of those games seriously. Probably the one in OKC, and then maybe rest their guys in LA. But even when OKC rests their guys, they're still absolutely loaded. And then some real winnable games: Indiana, Brooklyn, Washington, Dallas, Golden State, and Utah. And then I think Phoenix will likely, who knows? Phoenix could be jockeying for the 6th seed potentially if Denver or Minnesota or Houston is slipping. So Phoenix will have something to play for on that game on April 10th as well. But I think the Lakers, they could only lose a couple games the rest of the way, maybe more realistically, like 3 or 4 more games, but that puts them at, like maybe 53 or so wins, which I think would that's building off of last season. Even if technically they're the 3 seed again, if you win more games and you enter the playoffs with this level of momentum, like who knows what could happen, right? I think they're looking like a team that will be favored in round 1 and will have a shot to potentially come out of round 2. So I think this win in particular, combined with the Minnesota and Denver wins, I mean, they now control their destiny in terms of the seeding. And as long as they take care of business and go 9-4 basically down the stretch here, they're going to be the 3 seed. They might be able to get away with it going 8-5, but if they go at least 9-4, I think they will be the 3 seed. And then takeaway number 3 is the man in the mirror. And I just quickly wanted to touch on DeAndre Ayton and the recent story in The Athletic, where it was, I think there's some similarities with the ESPN story and the Athletic story, but clearly this is DA speaking candidly after the Houston game. And I thought it showed a level of self-reflection and accountability and seriousness. He's had a couple of these quotes recently where he's basically said, the group has been playing at a certain level. The group has been taking things seriously to a certain degree that I've not quite caught up to them yet. And I just had this realization that it's time for me to catch up to them. Like I'm paraphrasing there, but that was the spirit of what he was saying. And I think you look at him staying engaged in both of the Houston and Denver wins, or the 2 previous clutch wins where he does not have a strong game through the first 3.5 quarters. JJ basically goes away from him in the second halves of both games, and he stays locked in and engaged. He comes back in with fresh legs, clean slate, and he dominates, and he helps the Lakers win and pull out both of those games. And then tonight he comes out, I think, with his best start in a few games, probably going back to, first quarter wise, probably going back to the New York game, but like first half wise, maybe the Minnesota game. But I just wanted to acknowledge, I think he's showing some growth here during the stretch. I think it started with the New York game after he exited the Denver game after a few minutes and then missed the Indiana game. Since coming back, he has been on an upward trajectory, and the Lakers, he might not be, he had the quote about looking at himself in the mirror and being like, you're not that guy, bro. And while that's true, he's not the guy that he's not played up to a number 1 pick level. He has not maybe played up to the trajectory it looked like he was going to be on early in his career in Phoenix. He makes the finals as a starting center a few years into his career. I thought he had a really strong postseason. I've talked about, I covered that postseason. I was really impressed with his run. I thought his defense against Jokic in that matchup with Denver was some of the best defense I've seen one-on-one against Jokic outside of Dwight Howard. So there was a lot to be encouraged and excited by at that time, and his career has obviously taken a left turn a bit. But for him to have that realization and to publicly take accountability and acknowledge the quiet part out loud of, it did feel like at times the group was playing with a certain seriousness and that he was kind of sulking or just not really on the same wavelength as everybody else. For him to acknowledge that, to own that, and to not only talk about it publicly with his words, but actually back it up with his actions, I think that's shown some real growth and maturity from him. And so I think as we look at these final 13 games and the playoffs, he is LA's X factor. We know what we're going to get from Luka. There's a certain amount of production and reliability and steadiness. I think playoff LeBron has shown what he can do, and there'll be certain expectations for that. Austin is going to have a lot of pressure on him being an impending free agent, and just all of the discourse with whether he could be a number 2 or a number 3 or how he fits with Luka. But then you get to a point where it's I don't think any other role player has as much pressure on them as DeAndre Ayton does, because when he is on and right and engaged in the right mental headspace, he just makes his team so much better and so much tougher to beat. And just like it's just a totally different team when DeAndre Ayton is playing at a certain level than when he is not. And if this ends up being a situation where they have to reduce his minutes, they have to go away from him in the clutch, they have to play Jackson more, Maxey more, small ball more, I just think that ultimately lowers the Lakers' ceiling. Like, I think the best version of the Lakers is DeAndre Ayton hitting his ceiling and being a 30-plus minute a night guy, but like actually deserving it and not just, you're our starter, here's 30 minutes. And he's been playing at that level lately. He's got to keep it up here over the final 13 games. Like, kind of post-December, he's had a couple of spurts of a few good games and then kind of goes back to being the same player he had been for a while. But he's been building off of this. I think there's a lot to like about his recent play. And if he keeps this up, I think that's going to be a big determining factor in how far LA can go in the playoffs, especially when you think about if they're playing Houston, he's matched up with Şengün. If they're playing Denver, he's matched up with Jokic. If they're playing Minnesota, he's got a three-headed monster with Gobert, Randall, and Naz Reid. And then it gets progressively tougher. You got Wemby, then you got the Twin Towers with Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein, and like it's going to be tough. So he's got to show up, and I think he's got to hold his own in those matchups. He's got to at least match his counterparts, and he's been doing that recently. But especially in the clutch. But he's got to keep it going. But I just wanted to give him a shout out from an accountability and maturity and growth perspective. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. Shout out to the chat. Appreciate you guys. T6466, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. I appreciate that. Shout out to T6466. Means a lot. All right, first one here from Always Busy Bee. Thank you for the super chat. Hey, I was just talking about this. This is perfect. I did not plan this, but a locked-in Ayton raises the ceiling. Ayton and Smart add things that were missing last season, starting to become a real challenge to San Antonio and OKC. Yeah, I really wish that the Lakers had. I would love to swap one of the OKC games for a San Antonio game just to see what this looks like against San Antonio and OKC down the stretch here, because I will note that I think San Antonio and OKC have been on a different level than the rest of the West, including Denver, Minnesota, and Houston, just all season. Like, I mean, you could make the case they're the two best teams in the league. I think a lot of people are making that case right now, that they're two of maybe three or four teams that can win the title. So it is, to me, like a different level playing those two. And even like you look at the records against teams above 500 or teams above 600, like there's kind of the Lakers have actually, especially now with the recent stuff, like they're faring better comparatively to Houston, Denver, Minnesota. They've gone from being like a distant sixth to third or fourth in some of those things. But you look at the top two and it's like OKC and San Antonio have just been at a different level for the most part all season. However, there are like OKC has had a Luka problem over the last couple of years. The Lakers played them really well down the stretch of last season. We haven't seen a true full strength matchup with the two teams. We'll see if we get that down the stretch of the regular season. And then with San Antonio, we've talked about it. They're unproven. Most of their primary guys have not been in a playoff series, or if they have been, it's like a De'Aaron Fox who's been in one playoff series and it was a first round exit in 7. So there's just a lack of proof of concept there. And also, like, NBA history suggests teams like San Antonio typically go through their lumps of losing in the second round or conference finals before breaking through with like a championship or a finals run. So San Antonio, it feels like there will be a crucial point where they're kind of thrown into the fire, and we'll see how they handle that. And that could be potentially round 2 against the Lakers. But agreed on the Ayton point. I just made that with my third takeaway. Smart. I mean, I've been making the case. I think he's easily their fourth best and most important. Like, when we get into like most important, I guess like you could debate Ayton versus Smart, because I do think Ayton can shift their ceiling to a higher level than Smart can. But Smart has basically been, from January 1st on, he's been nearly a 40% 3-point shooter. You add in his multi-positional defense and the impact he's had he's one of only two players that the Lakers are better on both sides of the ball with Marcus on. They're better offensively and defensively. He's just been huge. So I think, both those guys bring, I think Marcus has been better than DFS. DFS really swung things plus minus wise, net rating wise, but I think this version of Marcus is better than the version of DFS we saw last year. And then Ayton, when he's right, is better than the version of Jackson we saw last year. And I think the Lakers can really challenge San Antonio in round 2. I think San Antonio would be the favorites, and I think there are justifiable reasons for that. But especially factoring in one side has like Luka and LeBron and all of their collective playoff experience and the deep runs that they've had. I think like from an experience perspective, it's not close between the two teams. And Luka, I think, is the best player in that series. And then depending on what version of LeBron and Austin you get, that might swing that. The Enigma 2004, thank you for the super chat. The 4th annual Lakers post All-Star break surge was a little late, but better late than never. Let's go. Yeah, I mean, this is a tradition unlike any other. If you look at, so last year they won. I mean, last year the surge started a little bit more like, the surge started in mid-January last year. Remember they had that Miami win. They lost in Houston and Dallas. They had the couple games postponed because of the fires. Then they got waxed by San Antonio. But then after that, they were 20-17 on January 14th. From that point on, they went on to win 20 of their next 24, which was a stretch where they had the league's best defense over that 24 games. Then LeBron goes down in that Boston game. They lose that Boston game. They go on a little bit of a skid. And the rest of the season, they actually go 10-11 over the final 21 games. But yeah, they started the run a little bit earlier. Then, I mean, I think most famously, you go back to 2022-23, post-trade deadline, post-Russ trade. They go on that big run where from February 11th on, they go 17-8 to close the season. And then 2023-24, I mean, they also went on a run where they closed the season 11-3, starting around this point. It started March 18th with a blowout win at home against Atlanta. So you could actually argue the 2024 season was a little bit later. It was like around this point was when they started the surge. But to your point, like, this has become an annual tradition. The Lakers, for whatever reason, just are a different team post February 1st, post All-Star break. And it certainly makes the stretch run of the season fun because they are often playing their best basketball. Now, if you're a cynic, you could say, like, in the past 3 years, they've only gotten out of the first round one time. So it hasn't necessarily like materialized into what you would want it to materialize. You'd want this to mean they're going to make second round, third round, or beyond. But I think this team is a little different this time. And I think because again, I just said, like, last 21 games of last year, they actually went 10-11. So they had been like a 500-ish team down the stretch of last season and weren't playing their best basketball going into the playoffs. This year, they're rolling. And unless things somehow go off the rails here, the final 13 games, like, I just think they're in a different spot than they were last year. The More We Know 77, thank you for the super chat. No offense, but I ain't giving Austin all that money if he can't step up against these physical teams. It's kind of sad he can't scale up in these games. I think it's going to be a factor. I don't know a factor in his ultimate contract. I don't know to what degree. I think I said degree. I don't know to what degree, but what I will note is that, I mean, he's got a couple more opportunities here. I think Orlando isn't the same level, but they are another physical defensive team. Detroit, Like I look at Detroit, I look at OKC twice, and even Phoenix at the end of the season, because he hasn't been the most efficient against Phoenix and their ball pressure and their perimeter defense. If he can at least step up and have big performances and efficient performances in 2 of those 4 games, I think that would sway that. Like I think I look at Minnesota as a team that on paper, like checks a lot of those boxes of a team that's physical and long and good defensively, and he's fared well against them. So I think there are specific matchups, again, as I mentioned, OKC, San Antonio, Houston, where I think they probably have to scale his usage down a little bit and shift it more toward LeBron. But I also think we're talking about a matter of like, I mean, I guess my follow-up to you would just be like, how much are you talking here? Like, are you saying you wouldn't pay him $30 million, you wouldn't pay him $35 million, or you wouldn't pay him the max? Because if you're saying you're not going to pay him the max, like I think that will just be determined by his playoffs. But it has up until recently been trending, I think downward. He had a month-long stretch where he just was not the same player, but he has been playing better lately. He's now had a couple of subpar offensive games. I think he's going to turn it around on the road trip, but if he continues to struggle in some of these big matchups and struggles again in the playoffs, then we're going to have a different conversation. I'm remaining cautiously optimistic, but I also, like, I do acknowledge, I think some of these matchups, like if they play Houston and Amen Thompson's guarding him for a full series, I don't think you're going to see the best version of Austin. So that is something that he will eventually have to conquer and get over. And it is something to factor in if you are saying he's your number 2 moving forward. Like that is, in some ways I'm advocating for him to be the number 3 in certain matchups. And like, if you can't be the number 2 in certain matchups, then, you know, you're maybe like a 2.5, I guess. Like he's kind of in between that, but I think he could be the number 2 against San Antonio. I think he could be the number 2 against Denver. But I do think it's a little bit more matchup based right now. Jay, thank you for the super chat. This team, man, the energy, the effort, and the ball movement and the chemistry feels so much different than earlier this year. Screw it. I believe, baby. I love it. I love the optimism, Jay. And yeah, I mean, the ball movement tonight, 30 assists, that anytime the Lakers are really above like 25, you see their record win percentage is very high. But I mean, first half, like the first half, I love the first half. They had 3 turnovers, 20 assists on 27 makes. Outside of like a few missed free throws, that was really the only blemish. I think they shot 59% in the first half. So they actually shot higher in the second half to finish at 61% overall. But there's a lot to like. I agree. The energy, the effort, the defensive execution, like they tightened things up in the fourth quarter. Houston only scored 24 points, their lowest scoring quarter. And then remember, they just scored 12 points in the fourth quarter against LA last game. So they've held Houston to a combined 36 points in the 2 fourth quarters. And that, again, is why I have so much optimism for LA in this matchup. But yeah, I mean, it's hard not to believe. I mean, this team has found something here, and I don't know what it's going to lead to. I think I still want to see more, but they keep passing every test in front of them. And if they go 10-3 down the stretch here and have this extended period of, so what they've won 10 of 11. If they go, let's just say 10-3, that's like 20-4. It's replicating the 20-4 stretch from last year, but you're doing it going directly into the playoffs as one of the hottest teams, if not the hottest team in the league at that point. That's something I think that's something. Then Jay follows up. This is what gives me optimism for the playoffs. If you can get 1 or 2 games, a series from Braun like tonight, LA will not be an easy out. I agree. And like this version of LeBron against San Antonio, that's the version of LeBron, or that's the version of the Lakers I think can beat the Spurs. Like I think the one thing and this is where I'm really interested in the OKC matchup. I think we kind of saw this a little bit in the Denver game, although they had that rough like first 18 minutes or so of the game. But I think that the big thing for the Lakers, and one of the things that if I'm the coaching staff, if I'm the scouting department, I'm really trying to lock in on here over the final 13 games is I think that the biggest difference arguably between OKC and San Antonio and the rest of the West. So basically the difference between the first round opponent versus the second round or potentially third round opponent is like the just level of seriousness. And OKC and San Antonio, I think both have a level of seriousness and professionalism and efficiency that the other three teams in the West just don't have. And so you see like tonight, Denver tricks away a bunch of turnovers and loses to Memphis on the second night of a back-to-back. This was a golden opportunity for them to potentially ascend in the standings. They have it just kind of crap the bed tonight. Houston, I mean, I don't need to tell you how unserious Houston is. I think we just saw it the last couple of games. And then Minnesota can be very Jekyll and Hyde with their seriousness on a night-to-night basis. So I think it is a step up in that sense of like, basically, I think the Lakers cannot afford to have some of the lapses. Like, I think that third quarter that they had, I don't think they come back against OKC or San Antonio. I think you could do that against Houston. I think you could do that against Minnesota, maybe even against Denver. But I don't think you could do that against San Antonio and OKC. So that's the difference there of, I just think like the level of focus and locked into every possession and making sure you're not having some of these lulls that they'll occasionally have. In the middle stretch against Denver or parts of the Houston game, the last one, and then definitely that third quarter tonight. Like they can't really do that against San Antonio and OKC if they expect to win the series. So that would be my thing. I'm trying to work on here down the stretch. Is like we've talked about it before, but like earlier in the season, there'd be games the Lakers showed up for a quarter and they had so much talent, so much firepower, so much skill that they were able to win those games because they just showed up for a quarter or they showed up for a half. I think they progressively have gotten better at playing a serious 30 minutes, a serious 35 minutes, a serious 40 minutes, a serious 42 minutes. Like no team's going to be perfect. No team shoots 100%. No team doesn't turn the ball over. No team makes 100% of the right decisions. But like, I think when you look at the top of the league right now with the OKCs, the San Antonios, the Bostons, those teams consistently win when their best players are out. Those teams have just, there's an accountability within the rotation that if you screw up, doesn't matter who you are, you're going to be benched, you're going to have your minutes pulled, whatever. And like, there's just, I think, an attention to detail that those teams have that the Lakers, to their credit, have been building and have had recently. My larger point is just, I think going from, let's just say they play Houston in round one, I think from like a seriousness perspective, I guess that's the word I keep coming back to. Going from playing like Houston to San Antonio or Houston to OKC, I think it's a night and day. It's not comparable. So that's something that LA, I think, has to continue to hone in on. And I think they've gotten much better with it. I think a lot of these recent wins, they've been serious for 3 quarters, 3.5 quarters, sometimes even all 4 quarters. But I think like a quarter like tonight, got to be really careful with that, because that, I think, against a certain caliber of opponent, you just lose the game. Like they don't let you back in it. Victor, thank you for the super chat. Do you think Luka and Braun might rest tomorrow? Great question. I kind of talked about this on Lakers Collective of, looking at the Lakers schedule here. I don't think they have one more back-to-back. They have a Washington, Cleveland back-to-back at the end of the month. Otherwise, this is their second to last back-to-back. And I just point that out because guys are banged up. I mean, Luka is clearly, he's diving on the ground for loose balls, and you'll see possessions where he's wincing. Austin had that possession where he fouled Amen Thompson, and it almost looked like he tweaked his hip or his groin or something. Marcus is taking a couple charges every game, and his backside and back are going through it. So it's like, LeBron has now fallen on his elbow a couple times. I believe it was each of his elbows, but still, like that was a tough spill. So I don't have an answer for you. I think if you're the Lakers, like on the one hand, every game still matters and you want to keep the momentum going. On the other hand, I think you got to keep the big picture perspective of Luka just played 38 minutes tonight. Austin played 39. And like Luka's been playing. Look at Luka's look at Luka in March. 29 minutes against Sacramento. That's a blowout. He actually gets the rest in a fourth quarter for once. 38 against New Orleans, 40 against Denver, 32 against Indiana. He played 32 of the 36 minutes through three quarters, doesn't play in the fourth. 38 New York, 35 Minnesota, 37 Chicago, 43 Denver, 40 Houston, 38 Houston. Luka is a guy who likes to play a certain amount of minutes, so I don't think they're going to like slash his minutes to a certain level, but I also think that's a lot of minutes for just anyone in the modern NBA. And I think, so I'm not advocating for it. I'm more so laying out the case for if they do it. I think it's like Luka's averaging 37 minutes per game in this month. And more recently, I mean, he's now played 6 straight games with 35 or more minutes, and 4 of those were 38 or more minutes. So it's like they've been putting a pretty heavy workload on Luka from a minutes perspective. And I think he's due for like a little bit of a break at some point here, or just a little bit of a respite. With LeBron, I think it's just how, I mean, JJ had the quote earlier in the season that he's back-to-back on he's day-to-day for every back-to-back moving forward. So I think he'll play. I think they both play, but I think it's in the Lakers' best interest to try to reduce their minutes at some point here coming up, because I don't think you want Luka averaging like 38 minutes per game going into the playoffs for like a month and a half stretch. I think that's asking too much. Jay, thank you for the super chat. I genuinely believe Braun loves being a Laker. I think he'll be willing to take a pay cut, $20 million a year, to allow LA to sign other guys and give it another go. This is certainly possible, and I think Shams just had the report the other day on ESPN that part of how the rest of the season goes will determine LeBron's interest level, or that's per Shams. So if we take that at face, I mean, the Lakers are playing great basketball. They look like they're going to be the 3 seed, and they look like they're potentially going to get out of round 1. And then if they're matched up with San Antonio, especially, who knows what happens. So it does feel like to this point that there's been a lot of pessimism. I will say I'm not the only one to report or talk about it that way. I mean, there's been several reports on it, but also just whatever I've talked to people, like a lot of people around the league, the operating assumption tends to be that LeBron is either going to retire or go elsewhere and not be a Laker. There's a minority of people who will say, maybe he comes back to the Lakers depending on the money or whatnot. But I think whatever percentage that was with the consensus, that seems to be nudging back in the direction of him potentially being back. And of note, I mean, if you look at, we've talked about it several times on here, but if you look at the most likely suitors or the teams that would make sense for LeBron, none of them have cap space. So if, let's just say in his negotiations with the Lakers, money is a big sticking point, well, the alternative would potentially be like going to Cleveland for the minimum. So even if the Lakers, let's just say, to your point, offer him $20 million, that's almost 6 times as much as the minimum, right? So the Lakers can win the money game even at a reduced cost. I think it just, there's more factors that go into it of, does he want to be there next season? Does he believe in it, that he's the right fit there? Do they want him? Do they believe? Like, there's both sides of it. But certainly, I mean, so the thing with this, just to lay it out a little bit, if LeBron returns on a $20 million contract, that is LA using cap space on him. So depending on the projection, there's somewhere between, let's just say, 48 to 57 million. If you spend 20 million on LeBron, you have 28 million left. If you spend 20 million on LeBron, you have 37 left, right? Like somewhere in that 28 to 37 range. So 28 range, you might only really be able to get like one impact player. 37, you might be able to pull off 2, but it would almost be like, LeBron is one of the impact like acquisitions in the summer, and then you're maybe adding like one more guy or two if you're fortunate and can kind of finagle it. So that's the only thing here. And then that's before even mentioning what happens with DA, what happens with Rui. There's a lot of moving parts with the Lakers this offseason. So, but yeah, I mean, I think I've said at the right price, I think it makes sense, but I also understand from both sides why either side or both sides could want to go in a different direction. So I think how it plays out the rest of the season will ultimately determine what happens. iPod Kills, thank you for the super chat. Sup, Jovan, is this the first time since 2020 the Lakers are 19 games over 500? Do the Lakers reach 52 wins? I believe they will reach 52 wins. They only have to go 8-5 down the stretch. So what's wild? So I encourage you guys. Well, I'm going to find the clip and I'm going to clip it and go back to it, but I don't want to jinx it. So I'm going to wait till the end of the season to do it. But I'm like 99% certain my season preview that I did with Trevor, I said the Lakers were going to win 52 games. I said they were going to be the 4 seed, not the 3 seed. So I will likely be off on that. But I said they were going to win 52 games, play Minnesota in round 1 in a rematch, beat Minnesota, and then lose to OKC in round 2. Now, if they're the 3 seed, they'll play San Antonio in round 2. And again, we'll see what ends up happening. I think it's too early to project. I think the Lakers have to, if they can sustain this throughout the rest of the regular season, we can start talking crazy about a San Antonio matchup. I think like they have to prove that they can do that. But yeah, I mean, pretty close. 4 seed, 52 wins, second round team. We'll see how close that ends up being. But I think it's in the ballpark. But yeah, I mean, I think I'll probably end up being low. I think they could win 53 or 54 and then be the 3. And then I was a little bit too low on them, but still higher on them than most. Honcho, thank you for the super chat. Sixers, the answer. Spurs, the Admiral. Celtics, the truth. Rockets, the dream. Lakers, the logo. Diesel. Now we have the mirror. Need your blessing on this one. I rock with it as I shake I'm literally rocking with it. I'm shaking my desk and my camera right now. I like it. Add another one. You also have the machine. I can't forget Sasha. I'm trying to think of, Luka, the Lakers broadcast loves calling him the Don. So Lakers have several the nicknames, but yeah, I like the mirror, the man in the mirror. It's appropriate. Trev Gamer, thank you for the super chat. This is why we stand said the Luka slanderers needed checking. Luka is the best in the world and getting robbed of another MVP because most joined in on the ESPN narrative. Us stands are the ones who actually understood. I have no disagreements. I mean, I have said I don't really want to relitigate the whole Luka discussion just because I feel like those who listen to my show like know where I stand on this, and I have said I think the conversation got way too negative. And I mean, even recently when he I think the nadir of the season was that Boston, Orlando, Phoenix stretch where the Boston game, according to NBC, was the most watched regular season game in like 25 years or something like that, 22, 25 years. So you had all these eyeballs on that game. Luka doesn't have the best game. The Lakers get blown out, and all of a sudden it's pile on Luka. It had already been building, but like that took it to a different level where it felt like every day that week there was like multiple podcasts and TV show clips that came out that were just hammering Luka left and right. And then it kept building because then the Lakers followed that up with Orlando and Phoenix losses, and it felt like the season was over, the season was slipping away, and so then people, it was low hanging fruit, easy to just be like, let's pile on Luka, and like that's sort of the narrative that's building. But he's been playing incredible basketball since that exact stretch, and he's been carrying the Lakers and is the driving force behind this 10-1 stretch and 7 wins in a row. And to your point, like, assuming the Lakers maintain the number 3 seed, that has been something that has been used against Luka before in the MVP race. And even I think earlier in the season when it was tougher to make that case when they were the 5 or 6 seed, just because, and there are exceptions, but for the most part, you typically, if you look at the history of MVP, you typically are a top 3 seed with some exception. But yeah, I mean, my only thing, like at least on my end, is I think we should be able to criticize people, and no one is above criticism. So that's been, I feel like at times, I feel like I've been pretty fair on Luka, and I know Luka fans who say that they like my pod because they think I'm fair with him, and like I don't overdo the criticism. But there are some people who I feel like if you don't, like, you know, say, if you don't agree with their viewpoint of him, or if you say anything negative about him, and forget even Luka. Let's move Luka out of this. This is just sometimes the stand culture with a particular player of, if you say anything negative about the player, that means you like hate them or don't think they're as great as they are. And I fundamentally disagree with that perspective. I think if, like tonight, I mentioned, like, Luka had several turnovers in that third quarter. It was not his best quarter, but I also said he more than made up for it because he dominated the clutch and he nearly had a 40-point triple-double. So there are people who will focus on the negative and be like, he missed free throws, his turnovers, like, you know, Luka can't lead the team, which I don't agree with. But, you know, I think the key is to focus on the positive, especially if there's more positive than negative. But, like, I think there's also nuance within it. And if you can't say anything critical, then like that's almost like censorship, you know, media or coverage. And I just don't believe in that. So, yeah, but I 100% agree that the coverage has been too negative. And I think those who have stayed loyal to Luka and have supported and believed in Luka are being proven right now, because I think he has been playing MVP basketball. I think he has been playing best player in the world basketball. And there's really no way to like disagree with, like, I just don't think that there's a way to disagree with that. Savage, thank you for the super chat. AR has to get back to hitting his shots, but Houston's whole game plan was to take him out the game with Amen. So I'm glad he didn't force anything that wasn't there, and the defense was great. Yeah, I mentioned this during my during the first segment I did on Austin, but I thought that he did take a step back offensively in terms of his usage and looking for his own shot. And that actually was a positive because he only had 1 turnover and he had 8 assists. So I thought he stepped up with the playmaking. And yeah, I mean, you know, I have said this before, 2 things can be true. I think the Lakers need more from Austin. Like, he's just too important to this team to have games where he has 12 points. They just need more from him offensively. But I think within the context of the game, with how Luka was playing, with how LeBron was playing, with how DA was playing, Austin sort of naturally became more of the 4th option. And I like that part of Austin's game of he is not going to force it if it's not really his night. Like, there have been some exceptions to that, but in general, I think Austin is a guy who, if he does not have it going, he will become more deferential and look to play make and not try to like shoot his way out of it necessarily. So I agree with you. Musical K420, thank you for the super chat. What the heck is Hayes doing? LA needs to waive someone and sign someone. Well, they're not going to waive Jackson, but Jackson's been in a bit of a slump here since returning from injury. You have the Denver game, which I thought he was okay, but it's just not a good matchup for him against Jokic. And then these last couple games, he's been quiet and underwhelming. I don't think the Houston he's kind of getting played out of these games, and LA has gone to a more playoff-like rotation. If you look at these last 3 games, it's been the bench. They've only played 9 guys. In 2 of the 3 games, they've only played 1 bench player 20 or more minutes. So JJ's really tightened up the rotation, and Jackson has not, like, as I mentioned, I like some of his perimeter defense tonight, but they need more than just that. And yeah, but in terms of waiving someone, I talked about it would only be Maxey or Kobe. Maxey has played real minutes for this group. It has a certain relationship with Luka and JJ, so I don't see that. Then Kobe was the guy that they identified from South Bay and brought up. I think if you look at their track record, they can sometimes have a difficulty admitting mistakes or like moving on from a situation. I think they sometimes tend to they make their bed and then they kind of like lay in it for a while instead of just getting up and changing the sheets. And that might be a situation where like I just at this point, I like the idea of Kobe Buffkin maybe on next year's team potentially, but he's just not playing on this year's team. And I think it again, we look at, I'm not saying Haywood Highsmith is like the biggest difference maker, but I at least would have more confidence in throwing him potentially in a game than I would Kobe Buffkin right now. Pastor D, Braun. This guy's figured it out. Braun, basketball IQ, intangibles greater than 75% of league. Need him next year. No one out there. Swiss Army knife, I assume. I would put 75% of the league is actually low. I would say LeBron's basketball IQ and intangibles are like, basketball IQ, he's in the 0.01% all time. Even right now, he's got the same basketball IQ. It's just he's not. I don't think he's not the same athlete that he was. So sometimes you'll see him try to do certain things that he's got the body of a 41-year-old. He's just his version of 41 is different than basically everyone else's version of 41. But he's playing great basketball. He's fit in perfectly since coming back, and this version of LeBron raises LA's ceiling to a different level as well. So I think, and again, I also think there's matchups where they should lean into him more. So he's playing great. News okay 420. Is there anyone we could sign who could help us, Jovan? We need one more guy who contribute off the bench, maybe Boucher or maybe a big guard. What do you think? Off the top of my head, there isn't anyone who stands out. If anything, the Lakers might have a guy on their bench who could help them in Adu Thero, but that doesn't seem like that's something that they're going to entertain down the stretch here. I think it's too late. I don't see them making a move, and I don't see that player. If Kobe Buffkin couldn't crack the rotation, there were games where they were depleted and they still didn't go to Kobe Buffkin. I just don't see them adding anyone who's really going to. So they could add Drew Timme as a 15th guy. They could add Nick Smith Jr. as a 15th guy, but I don't see those guys really moving. Timmy's maybe the one guy, depending on Maxey's health down the stretch, that if Maxey can't play down the stretch and going into the playoffs, maybe you add Timme instead of Buffkin, but that might be the only move. But even then, he's probably just breaking in case of emergency. Reed, thank you for the super chat. Run this core back with Kessler at $35 million. If Braun takes 15 to 20, send 2 firsts for Herb, and we'd be perennial contenders. Math works if DA opts out. And to that last point, there might now be a market for DA if he keeps this up. So him opting, as recently as a couple weeks ago, maybe even a week ago, it was looking very unlikely that he was going to opt out. But with the recent uptick in play, if he maintains this into the playoffs, there could be a market for him. I think more so as a backup center, but maybe it's even returning to the Lakers. So financially, this works. This would work depending on who. So it depends on what you send out for Herb, because you probably would not be able to just fit Herb into I think one of the primary ways the Lakers are going to look to add people this summer is to do some sort of, we give you a pick or a couple picks, or we just take on the player into our salary and don't give you anything, or maybe give you a second or swap or something, and you could just dump this player on us without getting anything back. The distinction here is if you're doing Kessler 35, Braun 15 to 20, that right there, you're already at 50 to 55 million, which is basically your entire cap space. So you would no longer have cap space for Herb. And one of the things that talked about this on my pod with Eric Pincus a couple weeks ago, but with LeBron, the whole cap space notion is predicated on LA rescinding the rights to LeBron. So they technically could keep the rights to LeBron and maybe they sign him to a contract quickly in free agency. But even if they do that, then he's on the books for that number. So you're still eating into that cap space. So this whole notion of 48 to 57 million, that's actually without LeBron. Now you can rescind the rights and still use the cap space on LeBron. So that's where here, let's just say you rescind the rights to LeBron and then you sign Kessler, Utah doesn't match, or maybe it's a sign and trade, whatever. Then you can use the rest of your cap space to bring in LeBron. But if you do that, you would not have extra money to take on Herb unless you're sending out money. Now you have to match salary or get pretty close with Herb, which I think he's making 14-ish next year before his extension kicks in. So, I mean, maybe you can attach Vando into this and you're saying like, hey, Herb's not really worth 2 firsts, but we'll give you a first for Herb, a first to get off Vando. Will you do that? Maybe it's Vando and Dalton, something like that. Shed a couple salaries, but that would probably be the way that goes. If you're trying to sign Kessler and just trade for Herb, now you lose LeBron. You can't unless he takes a minimum. You can't. Or I guess you could do the room exception on him, which is about 9 million, but I think that's probably lower than he's going to want if he's not taking the minimum to go somewhere else. So it would be tough to. You cannot pull off all 3 of these without sending out money. And I see you follow up here. Or send 3 firsts for Trey Murphy and go 82-0. Luka, AR, Trey, Braun, Kessler, Smart, Kennard, Laravia, Adu, Vando, Jax. Bench is kind of gross. So to follow up with this. So Luka under contract. AR, bird rights. We're factoring in his cap hold when we talk about the cap space. So AR back. Okay, you trade for Trey. Depends what you send out. But Trey's making more too, by the way, than Herb, so that also complicates this. Braun and Kessler. I mean, you don't have the cap space to do Trey, Braun, and Kessler. But now we're getting into the tricky part here, where Smart, I do not see Smart. I see Smart opting out. He's been too valuable, too good, too important. Smart's opting out, and someone's going to pay him, I think, honestly, double of what he's making right now, at least. It should be the Lakers, but we'll see if they can afford that. But they could also earmark that 9 million or so room exception. But then now Kennard is a guy that to get that cap space, you got to rescind Kennard's rights. So now you're offering Kennard either a minimum or you're offering Kennard that exception, but you're also potentially offering that to Marcus Smart. Laravia's under contract. Adu's under contract. Vando's under contract. Jackson is an impending free agent, and he's a guy who I think has largely been better than a minimum player. If he fades down the stretch here, maybe he's back to being a minimum player and you keep him on that. But point being, not only is Trey, Braun, and Kessler difficult to make, I mean, it's just impossible to make work unless LeBron takes a minimum, which I don't see happening. Now, when you start getting into the bench of Smart, Kennard, like it's just gonna be tough to, like with Jackson, they have the bird rights with him, so I guess they technically can go, like his cap hold's pretty low. But with Kennard and Smart, especially depending on the salaries those guys might command, it does get tricky to keep all those guys. So yeah, the bench isn't going to be great. You are losing Rui in this scenario. You're losing DA. But I think what's realistic maybe here is like, you probably have to pick between Marcus and Kennard with that 9 million exception. I think you could keep Jackson, but then Trey, Braun, and Kessler, I just don't see that being realistic. That's where, to my earlier point, if you're keeping LeBron, you're probably only adding 1 impact guy. If you're adding 2, it's got to be 2 that are sub 40 million. And Trey and Kessler, based on Trey's contract and the contract you just threw out for Kessler, they're at like 60 million or so. So that's way above that. Chuck Dangler, aka Fang Charlie, sup brate, giving more usage plus shots to LeBron may lessen his D. Easy shots for the win. AR gave a lot on D today, so he couldn't cook on O as much. And if Luka cooks, teams are going to be pissed at. Oh, I'm gonna stay away from the end of this one, but I do appreciate the super chat. Yeah, I mean, there's a balance, and this is where we also talk about, like, I know sometimes my guy Kennedy is always on me about talking about Luka's defense or Austin's defense or whoever's defense, and I do think there's just a fundamental difference in how much you can realistically ask a high usage offensive player compared to role players. Like, if you just think about even the word role player, like it means you're out there to play a certain role. And typically one of the base, fundamentals of being a role player is like providing a certain amount of defense. Unless you are a Luke Kennard, who is like a 1% shooter from all spots on the floor and is this like movement guy who could get into the blender and like is 6'4", so you can't really ask him to be a certain caliber of defender. Like those guys are rarer, and most of the elite teams have a bunch of 2A players. And like, I mean, just even look at like OKC, for example, they have maybe one subpar defender in their rotation, and it's Isaiah Joe, but he's also an elite shooter who consistently swings his shifts out there. Like he'll swing a quarter, a half with instant offense off the bench. Everybody else is at least an average defender, if not a good defender. It reminds me, honestly, of the 2020 Lakers. Like, you go back to the 2020 Lakers, that entire rotation was guys who were at a minimum average defensively, and most of them were good to elite defensively. And like, that's the way you want to build it. So my point being with LeBron is, like, as LeBron does more, it is tough to also ask him to do more on defense. And I think there will naturally be some slippage. Same thing with Austin, same thing with Luka. I think to Luka's credit, he has maintained his usage and also, I think, ramped up on defense the last few weeks, which is really difficult to do. You also add in his heavy minutes, and like that goes for the MVP case with Luka. But yeah, I mean, I think with LeBron, it's like you want to make things as easy as possible for him, but he's also going to make things as easy as possible. And getting him out in transition and off cuts, I think is a real way to leverage his physical and mental gifts. Zubcut, it's been a minute. What up? Thank you for super chat. Why does Udoka put Amen on AR the entire game instead of Luka? Interesting that both men in Houston put their best defenders on Reeves, not Luka. Great question. And my snapshot perspective on this is that I think, to some of the dialogue we've had, I think teams feel like they can take out Austin easier than they could take out Luka. And so if you put McDaniels on Reeves or you put Amen on Reeves, you have a better chance of slowing him down. And like with Luka, I mean, Luka doesn't matter who's on him. He's going to, I mean, we've seen him cook McDaniels. We saw him cook Amen down the stretch tonight. Like, Luka cooks anybody, right? It's a lot of nights just, is Luka making shots or not? But it's more so Luka's own, like, he's sometimes almost playing his own game out there where it's just like, does he make the shot or not? But Luka generates great shots and consistently the same types of shots that are part of his arsenal. So I think the psychology behind it is more so, let's just like put someone on Luka and do their best to stick with him, try to make things difficult, rear view contest, force him into either the drop big or if we're hedging, blitzing, like, but whatever's the coverage. But with Austin, like, we want to take Austin out. We think we have a better chance to take Austin out. And if we could take Austin out, now that puts a lot more pressure on LeBron, Marcus, DA, et cetera, to do more offensively. And so that's my quick psychology behind that. But it's something that the Lakers are going to have to figure out, because that is something I think we'll see teams do in the playoffs, and they need to have a count. And look, like tonight, the counter was LeBron was great. DA was awesome. And Austin stepped up with the playmaking, but I don't know if that could be the formula every single night in the playoffs. Fast Break Television, thank you for the super chat. Out of all the RFAs, who do you think we could have the best chance of getting if we pursued them? Well, it's funny after the last couple of games, but I think Tari Eason, and one thing I wish I know, this is another thing. I tell you guys that there'll always be a couple of things I wish I noted. Like I was having a back and forth with someone on the Tari Eason, like money and sort of his range. One of the things that I think goes without saying, but I am going to say it, like with an RFA, there is an element of you probably have to overpay, because I think I got a tweet from someone saying like, why should the Lakers pay him 16 to 20 million if, he's probably worth around like 14, 15 million. That's a fair point, but it's just for an RFA to actually poach the player, you typically have to overpay by a little bit. That's just how it works. You rarely get an RFA, at least an RFA who's like a starting level or above, or even high level bench player or above, player at market price. Like that's just not how, like at that, if you're offering them a market price contract, their team, unless they're in just a disaster financial situation with the apron, they're just going to match it. So you can offer Tari Eason 15 million, but I think Houston's going to match that in their sleep and like actually be getting him probably at a discount compared to what they might re-sign him at. So I think of all the guys, there aren't many, but I think Tari Eason's way more expendable to Houston than Peyton Watson is to Denver and Walker Kessler is to Utah. I also think he's going to cost less. So even if, let's just say, hypothetically, we put a $15 million valuation on Tari Eason, maybe you pay up 18, 20 million and outbid Houston and make them a little bit uncomfortable. That's different than outbidding Utah going up to 32, 35, 36 million for Kessler, or Peyton Watson going up to 27, 28, 30 million for Peyton Watson, right? Like I'd rather have Peyton Watson or Walker Kessler than Tari Eason. That's why they're getting paid more money. But it's also like once you start getting to a certain, like if you sign Kessler for 35 million, that's 2/3 of your cap space. Like that's like your big move. And I think he'd be great for the Lakers. And if they could pull it off, I think they should do it. But I think Tari Eason's easily the guy that is the most realistic of the prominent RFAs. Let me pull up the RFAs quickly, just to make sure I'm not forgetting anybody. Okay. 1 second. Sorry. All right. RFAs. Jaden Ivey. Chicago. I think Chicago is going to keep him. Mathurin is an interesting one, but the Clippers paid a hefty price in giving up Zubats. I think it would be a mistake to just let Mathurin walk. Duran is a guy I would throw everything at. I just don't think Detroit's going to let him walk now. Circle a block on Mark Williams, maybe? No? Anybody? I'd be interested in him at a certain price, but I don't think that's going to happen. Then we get into the Spencer Jones is interesting. Spencer Jones might be a guy who is gettable, and I would have interest in if I'm the Lakers, because if Denver's paying Peyton Watson 25, 30 million, and they also got to figure out the Cam Johnson situation of potentially flipping him, Spencer Jones might be a guy who I think that's an under the radar guy who I've really liked in Denver, and I'd be really interested in. I mean, there's like lower level guys like Diawara, Quentin Post, Pat Spencer, Jamal Shed, Thanasis. Agbaji is a guy I really like. But yeah, it's a pretty short list of the guys I think are going to make like double digit millions. And of those, I think Tari Eason. Now, in terms of further thoughts on Tari Eason, the only thing I'd add, I actually thought he did a better job on Luka defensively tonight than he did last game. And still gave you 6 rebounds, had 9 rebounds last game. But the shot has deserted him in a serious way. He's gone last 3 games, 2 for 11, 2 for 11, 4 for 13. Not been the same. I mean, he's hasn't made a 3 since the beginning of March. He's missed 21 straight threes. Like it's just, But maybe that drives his price down, and maybe he's more gettable. I really like Tarisin. Reeves, strongest soldier. Thank you for the super chat. I like that Austin went into play make mode today. I do too. I thought the passing was great, and there like several of the Lakers' best ball movement, ping, 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 driving kick, get into the blender sequences featured Austin. So yeah, I mean, he still found ways to contribute, and that I think is what's most important. Like, I think the Lakers just. Oh, sorry, I mentioned I thought this was wrong, but for some reason when I went back to my ESPN box score, it like went back to earlier in the game. So I said Austin had 12 points, he had 14 points, just to be clear. But still, like Lakers need more. Like, I think Austin's floor needs to be like 18 points a night. And even then, ideally, you want like probably 20 plus from him. But he still found ways to contribute tonight with the defense and the passing, and made a big shot in the beginning of the fourth during that run with that three. So yeah, I'm not too worried about Austin. Peter, thank you for the super chat. LA will get the 3 seed. I'm obsessed with matchups. Who would you want LA to play? Still think full strength Denver most dangerous. Shout out Atlanta, 11 wins in a row. I said it at the top, so you might have missed it, or maybe this was before I stated it. But I would want LA to play Houston. That would be my preference. Selfishly, from like I would say I'd prefer Denver or Minnesota from a entertainment standpoint. I think either LA Minnesota rematch or LA Denver, just Luka versus Jokic, their Denver's offense versus LA's offense, like which team can muster up the better defense. That would be I think like that to me as that could be a classic 7-game series potentially, or classic 6-game series, whatever it ends up being. So I think from like a competitive entertainment standpoint, Denver and Minnesota would be much more entertaining for me than I also just think Denver and Minnesota are better and like more entertaining teams than Houston. I think Houston, it's very much a slog, and they're not my like cup of tea necessarily. But I also think LA would I said earlier in the show, I think LA would beat them in 5. I think there'd be the one game that is sort of like the third quarter where they're able to leverage their athleticism. Like they did a better job taking care of the ball tonight. And, so maybe they have a low turnover game. They get hot from 3. Reed Shepherd hits like 4 or 5 threes. KD gets going. Şengün has a big night, and they pull out one of the 2 games in Houston. But I think LA would win that series pretty convincingly. Tin Media, thank you for the super chat. Being a basketball savant, would you agree that this season is the most realistic season for LA versus Boston finals matchup we've had in a while? Well, I don't know if I'd say I'm a basketball savant, but I will take the compliment. I appreciate that. I want to be one. I strive to be one, but I don't know if I'm there. Yeah. I mean, the last time it would have been possible would have been 2020. Boston was 3rd in the East that year. Lakers were 1st in the West, but that was the year that Boston lost in the conference finals to Miami. And yeah, so 2020, I guess. But yeah, I think next year's probably an even higher probability, because I think Boston will be, probably the favorite going in the East, not the league. Probably be the favorite in the East going into next season. Even more so, like I know a lot of people are picking them now to come out of the East. I can see that, and I'm probably there too. But I think Detroit. I just think that the right now those 4 teams are all relatively close, but I would give Boston like the slightest edge. I think it could be a larger edge going into next season, and then with LA, I think especially if they're able to build out a better, just a better bench and add, reshuffle the starting group and at least add 2 starting upgrades. Like if there's a world where you have a better starter than DA and Marcus, and maybe you even have DA and Marcus coming up. Like I think Marcus, the goal should be to keep him for sure. DA, I think depends how the rest of the season goes. Depends what he wants, if he would entertain being a bench player. But let's just hypothetically, like they're both back. If you can find a way to have a better starting center and a better 3-and-D guy, then we'll see what happens with LeBron, and still keep those guys as bench guys. Like I think LA would naturally be in a better position to come out of the West next season. So I would say like next season is I think more of a possibility than even this season. But yeah, I would agree that probably the first time since 2020 that this is a real possibility, because it was not 2022. 2021 was a down year for Boston. Lakers lost in round 1, 2021. 2022, Boston made the finals. Lakers had a train wreck season. 2023, Lakers made Western Conference Finals. And I mean, I guess 2023 was also, but like Lakers never really had a chance in the Denver series. And then not 2024, not 2025. So yeah, this is close. And that would be a dream matchup. Jeff, thank you for the super chat. A month ago, you told us you wouldn't blame us if we checked out and stopped watching the team. And I've listened to every episode since. Laker for life. I appreciate that. I appreciate, look, like I said, I mean, I believe I also said, like, I don't want you guys to stop listening to me, at least like, check into what I'm doing. But like in all seriousness, I believe fans should be fans however they want to be. And for some fans, that's sometimes you check out when, like, I'm not checked out and I'm here every post game, but I get if you, especially when things were rougher, like there was a lot of fans who were like, I mean, I would meet fans in person. There'd be people who'd be like, I just don't really like this team and I'm not having fun watching this team. And that's obviously shifted in a big way over the last few weeks and last couple of weeks in particular. But I don't blame anyone if they checked out. I've seen some tweets of being like, I've been checked out, but now I'm back in, and like, that's you. That's cool. But you're a real one. You are part of the late night gang, and you've listened to every single episode. So I appreciate you. Lakers Visuals, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. Shout out to Lakers Visuals. Appreciate you. Arno DeCapo, thank you for the super chat. We back, baby. We fucking back. OKC San Antonio versus LAL Western Conference Finals. OKC LA. That flights will be tough for that one, but that would be a fun Western Conference Finals. And then we get the best player in the world debate going with Shea versus Luka rematch from 2024. That would be a really fun Western Conference Finals. But yes, the Lakers are very much back, and they found something here. I believe it. Mo Love OG, thank you for the super chat. Always seems Braun, Lakers play better and turn it up post trade deadline. Like they had no choice but to make it work. I mean, I think this is just a trend with this group that for whatever reason, they've had a couple of, they've kind of had the same season in some, like, to varying degrees, but there's always like, it's some form of they've had a couple of hot starts. I mean, under JJ, they've had like it's been like 2 hot starts. Then they have this prolonged malaise in the middle portion, or like front middle portion of the season. Then going into like the January, February range, they start to turn it on. And then, I mean, last year, as we said earlier, they kind of, petered out there later in the season, going 10 and 11. But earlier with with Darvin 2023, but even 2024, like they do go on these little runs to close the season as we laid out earlier. So I think it's just part of the DNA with this group. I know with LeBron in particular, he's talked about it before, where he likes to approach the season with a certain pace and a certain mindset, and then he ramps up later in the season, and he wants to be going into the playoffs with a certain amount of momentum and in a certain groove. So I think that's a part of it too. But yeah, I mean, it seems to be part of the DNA. Going to go 5 more minutes, wrap up at the 2-hour mark. Johnny, thank you for the super chat. Hi, Jovan. What do you think is happening in the third quarters of games where they keep getting outscored? It happened tonight in the Denver game as well. Do you think it is something to be concerned about? I am not concerned because if you actually look at, so a couple of those recent games, yes, but I would also point to the Minnesota game where they blew that game open in the third quarter. I would look at the Chicago game where didn't close the quarter well, but it, like the starters, remember they had that big run coming out of halftime. Even this most recent Houston game, that was when they flipped the game. Remember they were down 6 at halftime and completely flipped the game in the third. So I would actually say, I mean, there's been like a sort of Jekyll and Hyde nature to them in the third quarter where they've had like a bunch of dominant third quarters and a bunch of terrible third quarters. But I think in general, that's been trending in the right direction lately. Let's see, I'm pulling up the Indiana game. They outscored them in the third. Pretty sure the Knicks game as well. Yeah, they dominated the Knicks. And so I would actually say, like you bring up a couple of good examples here of the Denver and the one tonight. You know, I think there'd been a little bit of a momentum shift, like late. Like the Denver one kind of started in the middle of the second quarter, and Denver outscored them going into halftime, and then carried that into the third. Same thing, I feel like kind of with Houston tonight, but I wouldn't overreact to that. I think there was a point earlier in the season where I was concerned with the third quarter stuff, but I think they've been much better with it lately. Tommen, thank you for the super chat. What teams will underachieve in the playoffs? Do you think Lakers can get Gafford in the summer, can get McDaniels and Giannis trade DK and Vando, get P. Watt? I appreciate the efficiency here. I mean, for me, this is low-hanging fruit, but I'm not as high on Cleveland as the NBA intelligentsia. So I think Cleveland, I think they'll win in round one, but I mean, I assume they're going to, depends where they finish in the standings, but if they're the 4 seed, they'll play Detroit in round 2. And I think I would pick Detroit over Cleveland. Now, so I guess it just depends how you view, like some people view, I've heard people on podcasts say Cleveland's the best team in the East, the most talented, the most skilled team in the East. They should be the East favorites. I am more on, I probably view them as like the 4th best team. And I don't trust James Harden in the playoffs. I will just come clean. I do not trust James Harden. He's got to prove me wrong, and more than one series. I mean, that would be it. Otherwise, I think I mean, maybe New York, I guess I could see, like right now I would pick Boston over New York in round 2. So for the Knicks, James Dolan came out and said they should win the title this year and that he expects to at least make the finals. So if they lose in round 2, I think that's a disappointment. Then in the West, I think Minnesota is probably the team I look at where it depends on the matchups, but going from like back-to-back Western Conference Finals to losing in round 1 would be a disappointment if you're Minnesota. I think OKC's at least making the conference finals. I think San Antonio is at least making round 2. Then, you know, Denver's another candidate where if Denver gets matched up with Minnesota in round 1, it could be Denver who ends up losing, and or maybe they lose to the Lakers in round 1. So like I would say Denver and Minnesota are probably the 2 teams I'm looking at right now. That, like, Houston, I guess technically would be a disappointment too, but I view Houston right now as like clearly the 6th best team in the West. I almost view them as in their own tier. Like I would pick Denver and Minnesota both decisively over Houston if those 2 teams were matched up. So I think Houston's the team everybody should want to play among the top 6. But yeah, I mean, otherwise I'm going relatively chalk of like, I think Pistons make the conference finals. I think OKC makes the conference finals. San Antonio is kind of playing with house money. People expected them to like maybe be a play-in team. They're the 2 seed. And even if they lose in round 2, I don't think that's like a major disappointment just based on the season they've had. So I would say for me, it's probably Cleveland, Minnesota, and Denver are the 3 teams that I'm looking at as like potential disappointments. And then Gafford, I think it's going to be tough to pull with the Dallas history I'm skeptical of that. McDaniels, maybe, but I think you will have to give up some real draft capital. I don't think, I think there will be a team that will step up to take McDaniels for draft capital and you'll find a way to make it work. So I think the Lakers, like, you'll have to give something up there. DK and Vando, I think, are going to be, DK is not going to be tough to trade necessarily, but you're not trading him as like some positive asset. Vando still is a negative asset. So you're going to have to attach something to get off that. Unless it's in a situation where you're taking back a contract that a team just really doesn't want. And I would love Peyton Watson on this team. And then T-Rav, thank you for the super chat. At what point do we start to get credit for our winning streak? Seems like all the pundits keep blaming other teams' mistakes and poor play as reasons why we've won. Goalposts keep being moved. I'm not doing that. And if you have somehow interpreted my analysis as that, that's not been the case at all. I mean, I said multiple times throughout this show that the Lakers Luka walked the Rockets down tonight. Lakers took control of the clutch last game against Houston. They out-executed Denver in the clutch. The Chicago game, Chicago. Minnesota, they broke that game open in the third. New York, they led wire to wire the entire game. Indiana, they messed around a little bit in the beginning, but then they took that one seriously and put their foot on their neck. So, I can't control what other people say, and it's easy to get clicks and stuff to be negative about the Lakers, to say certain things. And, so I'm sure there will be more of that this week, but I haven't said that. I think the last thing on my docket list for the Lakers was have some statement wins, beat some of these teams, and do it full strength. And we saw, even in the Houston matchup, if you wanted to be really cynical and be a skeptic, they beat them without Şengün. Well, Şengün came back and then they beat them again by the same amount of points. So it's like, no, I'm not detracting anything from the Lakers' recent stretch here. Not at all. So if I've somehow made you think that, that was not my intention, but yeah. People are saying it wasn't addressed at me. That's then yeah. I'm just responding to that. I don't. Paul's asking who sits tomorrow. I think the two guys that would be the theoretical candidates to me would be LeBron and Marcus. LeBron because he's 41, still dealing with sciatica, still dealing with the foot arthritis. That would be I would not fault LeBron for sitting out second night of a back-to-back as a 41-year-old. And then Marcus is just continually banged up with his style of play, that he's also the second oldest guy on the team, or second oldest rotation guy on the team. That'd be the only other one. And they have Marcus, recently missed a game that they the Chicago game, that they were just being a bit conservative with him. So I could see maybe one of those two, but I think they're going to keep going for it. We've seen some of these recent back-to-backs, they've gone for it, and you're on a 7-game win streak. Keep going. Ryo, I've admittedly, my son's out here for the week for spring break, so I didn't see if LeBron said he's playing tomorrow, then that means he's playing tomorrow. But I had not seen that yet. But, all right. I am going to wrap here, though. Appreciate you guys for hanging out for a couple of hours. I will be back in less than 24 hours to discuss Lakers Heat. Lakers on the second night of a back-to-back. It's going to be a tough game. Miami's playing better than their record. They've been rolling. Had the Bam 83-point game. But Lakers, I think, assuming everybody plays or most people play, have a real chance to take care of business tonight, and keep this thing rolling. But shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you all. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. Appreciate those who subscribed recently. I said at the top of the last show, I wanted to hit 34,000 subscribers by the end of the month. We hit 34 subscribers in less than 24 hours after that. We had over 100 people subscribe. Don't know if it was directly off of that, but appreciate you guys. So over the 1,300 people watching right now. If you're not yet subscribed, please consider doing so, and it would mean a lot. And make sure you get my notifications for when I go live. Also, check out the Buha's Block Discord, where I always post when I'm going live in there as well, and answer questions when people tag me. So let's get this thing to 35,000. That would be now the new goal by the end of the month. And for those listening on audio, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your evening/day. Shout out to the Late Night Gang.